Hey folks, Aaron here. Now, I get asked a lot of questions. People email me, they tweet at me, they ask me questions in the comments on personal photos on Instagram. It's all the time I'm getting asked questions. So I thought today I would do a lore-specific Q&A here on YouTube. And what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've asked my Patreon supporters and I've asked some Twitter followers just to ask me questions in general about lore, about Grim and Mild, about making podcasts, that kind of thing. And I'm going to answer some of those right now. I'm going to give priority to my Patreon backers, which if you are ever interested, it's at patreon.com/lorepodcast. So we're going to start with a question from Kevin Kirkman. It says, you've been making lore for more than 7 years. What's the greatest thing these stories have taught you about humanity? Well, nothing good, I promise. I've learned about how good people are at identifying the other in their community and then treating them differently. I've learned about how fueled by fear most communities are. But I have also learned that throughout a lot of history, the human traits that often win the day and move things forward are things like hope and kindness. So I guess that helps. Adam Shinpa on Patreon asks, do you plan on doing live shows again, and when? And I got to tell you, I really miss touring and doing meet and greets after the shows. Honestly, it's one of my favorite things to do. But I have enough friends and family members with immune issues and other illnesses that I just don't feel good about traveling right now. And if that means, especially if that means bringing something home to get them sick. And then never mind the risk that it also poses to the folks who attend the live shows in all of these places in an indoor theater. And there's also a lot of other issues too that are kind of semi-connected to the pandemic. It's made theaters really hard to book over the last year. Performers all across the country are posting messages online about how challenging it's become with cancellations and then people trying to, get rescheduled dates into those theaters, and it's kind of jamming things up, and it's affecting the economy of theaters and the economy of touring. And honestly, I would just hate to go out and add to that chaos. So for right now, I'm just kind of holding off. Next question comes from Caleb Tudor on Patreon. They ask, what is your favorite cryptid? Man, such a difficult question to answer. You have to understand that I was a grade school kid in the 1980s, so a lot of my earliest memories of cryptids are about the big, most commonly talked about ones back then, the Loch Ness Monster and of course Bigfoot. And maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I think that those will always have a soft spot in my heart. Bren Cole from Patreon asked, of all the locations you've talked about, which ones would you like to visit the most? For me, the location that stands out the most has to be the McMillan Mausoleum from that early episode of lore called Dinner at the Afterglow. I've seen so many great photos of that place, oftentimes sent to me by listeners who have gone to it and taken photos, and I'm incredibly jealous of them. I honestly would love to visit and just sit at that stone table there. It is so cool looking. On Twitter, Paper Cicada asks, have you ever had any paranormal experiences like those in your podcast? I have had a couple, in fact, but those were all covered in detail in episode 200 of Lore, so I want to make sure that I don't spoil that for folks who haven't heard that episode yet. When we were looking at planning out the episodes for 2022, the 200th episode just felt like a big milestone, and it seemed like a good place to make an episode that was a bit more personal than usual. And so it's got some of those personal anecdotes in there. So check out episode 200 for some really great spooky, personal to me stories. Again on Twitter, Mary Not Barry asks, has there ever been a story you've researched, you've decided not to include? If so, what about the story made you think twice? We don't necessarily put a label on the show, but we really don't want lore to be a graphic, violent podcast. There are plenty of them out there, and truth be told, I don't think that you need blood and guts to tell a good story. So while I can't think of a specific topic that we've tossed in the bin, I can tell you that most of the time we've done it for that reason. Also on Twitter, Afton G. Keir asks, what was your favorite episode of Lore to produce? Content, sure, but also the recording and the audio editing. Honestly, my answer to that is all of them. I think all of the episodes they're designed and built the same way. We're really particular about the flow of the episode. Every episode has the same sort of narrative structure, and that feeds into the way the production process unfolds. You'll always get an introduction, and then the 3 acts of the story, followed by a summary, and then after the ads, there's that bonus story that we call the epilogue. So because it's always the same, always built the same, and then written the same, the production doesn't really ever have any sort of like standouts or superstars. It's just, let's produce it in the lore style. These next 2 questions pair up really nicely together, so I'll answer them both together. The first one comes from Justin A. Levine, who asks, what is the process for developing an episode of lore, and who does what for each episode? And then just kind of hold that off to the side for a moment. Sidewalk Artwork also asks, how long does each episode take to research? So this is a good question, and I get asked this a lot in interviews and such. What does it take to make an episode of lore? So the beginning of the entire process for us starts in what we call the lore writer's room. We do it once a year, and it's essentially like I've copied it from the TV writing experience that I had on the Lore TV show, where a bunch of writers get together in a room. They plan out the episodes of a TV show. They hammer out the beats, each individual bullet point on the outline, and then scripts are built from that. And so what I wanted was a place once a year where all of the lore researchers could gather with me. We started doing them before the pandemic, and now we still do them, so they're all Zoom-based for us. But everybody brings episode ideas. All of those episode ideas have to pass my sniff test, my intuition, my gut check. There's just some things that feel right for lore and some things that don't, and I don't know how to put that on paper and make it a rule. I gotta hear it, and then I know. So we do a writer's room. The idea is that we walk out of that writer's room at the end of maybe 2 days of doing a lot of pitching and building outlines and helping each other, sharing story scraps that we had that we couldn't find a home for with another person who's looking for a scrap, like things like that. And looking at themes, looking at ideas and concepts. And at the end of that, we want to walk away with at least enough topics approved that we have topics for the coming year. So lore is every other week right now, and that means 26 episodes a year, although we do weekly in October. So most years that works out to 28 episodes a year. So, we're trying to come out of writer's room with 28 of those topics that are set and approved. What we also come out of that with is, for each of those topics, what I call a micro outline. It's just like half a page long, and it just says, here's what the episode will be about. Here's what Act 1 covers. Act 2 covers this, and Act 3 is about this. We can maybe find a little piece of information that's nice to tuck away in the summary, like a little surprise ending. And then what's that thematically related epilogue going to be? Something that's like on the same topic, but not essential if you somehow miss it. You're not missing out on the finale. And then we put those in the outline along with any sources we bumped into in the writer room process. Those all get put in that micro outline doc in Google Docs. And then once we have planned out the year's topics, the researchers all sort of converge on that list like a pack of wolves trying to tear apart a deer, grabbing their favorite topics and fighting each other for it. And then everybody who has picked their stuff, we've all signed up on a spreadsheet in Google Docs again, and they will take that micro outline and they'll build the full outline. They will go deep into the research. And people say, where do you get your sources from? It's honestly, it varies from topic to topic. Some things are like super local lore type stories, and so it's good to go into newspapers because those have the local stuff in them. Sometimes it's a global thing, like or a common household name, like Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot, for example. Those you can find in books, and you can find in encyclopedias, and sometimes scholarly journals. And so every topic kind of dictates where you're going to get your source material from, but they go deep into that source material. And they usually hand me a 12 to 20 page outline. Depends on the researcher, depends on the topic. But those 12 to 20 pages have everything that I need. So when I sit down to write, I can look at that, I can ingest it, I can think about it. I usually read it the day before. I process it, and then I write the episode based on that. I'm constantly looking at the outlines. I'm constantly, highlighting things and making notes. I've developed a little writing a storytelling guide that it's blank and I fill it in for every episode where I say, on page 1, this is what I'm going to cover. On page 2, I'll cover this, and that's act 1, and then for act 2, the first page I'm going to do this, the second page I'll do that. So I'm pretty process driven when it comes to writing. And that helps me stay on schedule. It helps me, not drop the ball, because lore doesn't take breaks. Every other week there's a new episode. I start writing first week in November, which is actually just in a couple weeks here. And then that 28 episodes or so, if I write one a week, gets me through usually the end of May. Sometimes takes longer, sometimes takes less. I have written 3 episodes in 1 week before, but my brain likes it when I write one a week, and I have less problems that way. It's easy to get a headache and be very, very fatigued when you've written 3 episodes in 1 week. So there's your Q&A for today. I hope that helped you understand some of the stuff going in behind the world of lore and what it takes to make the show. And if you have more questions for me, I'll do more Q&A down the road. Feel free to drop them in the comments below. If you know us on social, you can find Lore Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You can send your questions there as well. And as always, thanks so much for watching. If you found this link through some social site and you're not subscribed for some reason, click the subscribe button, and then there's a little bell icon. Click that too so you don't miss future episodes. And you can also give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed this particular one. And you can also follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Just search for Lore Podcast, all one word, like I said, and then click that follow button. And hey, when you do, say hi, because I do like it when people say hi. And as always, thanks for watching.